Hello Tech Pros, episode 149.
Whatever language you're working in, really learn and focus around what the idioms and guidelines are for that language, because it's those things that are going to help you write the best code in that language.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Bill Kennedy. Happy Tuesday, Bill.
Hey, happy Tuesday.
Are you prepared to be productive?
Trying every day to be productive. I like saying not wasting effort.
Not wasting. I like that. That's a new response for me. I'm going to have to use that more often. Bill Kennedy is the managing partner at Ardan Studio in Miami, Florida, a mobile web and systems development company. He's also a co-author of the book Go in Action, the author of the blog goinggo.net, and founding member of GoBridge, which is working to increase Go adoption through diversity. There's a lot of Go going on there, Bill. And more than that, we've had you as a prior guest on Hello Tech Pros. So way back a long time ago on episode 54. And that was a people episode. That Friday was about your tech interviews are scaring away brilliant people. And that was an awesome one for me because, man, sometimes as a person getting interviewed, and then sometimes a person doing the interviewing and seeing other technical people in the room ask really hard questions, it's like, man, just give these folks a break and let's figure out if they're nice folks or not.
Yeah, and there's been some fun Twitter conversations around that as well, even recently. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's always fun to see those old episodes get recycled on Twitter and folks see them for the first time. There was a comment that really stood out to me there in that episode where you said that sometimes we get these vampires at work, right? And they just suck all the life and fun out of the party, out of the work. And the interview is really about getting rid of the vampires, right? Making sure the vampires don't enter the building. And as long as they're cool, actual human beings that have the capacity to learn the stuff, then yeah, maybe they're great at tech, maybe they're okay at tech, or maybe they can just learn it. But first of all, let's just make sure that we have a healthy environment without those vampires.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And from a Go perspective, because the language is the demand for it, everybody wants to really start using it. The talent pool, there's very few people who can turn around and say, well, I've been programming in Go for a year. So what I've been finding lately is a lot of companies are, because I do a lot of training, and companies lately have been asking if they could open the training up to people outside of their their pool of employees, so they can show the community around them that they're into training and they'll get this education with the hope that they can hire programmers, even if they don't know Go, but solid people and programmers, with that idea that we're also going to have training here. And I think that also grows that idea of having a work pool, right? It's not just a job, right? Like, we're trying to build a family here, and we're gonna educate you along the way there too.
Man, I love that. And I've worked in a lot of different companies, and some of them that is absolutely the mentality. I worked at one though where for full-time employees, it was absolutely about personal growth, about technical growth, about all kinds of training opportunities that we could provide. But, when it came to those contract positions where we just had, something that we had to get knocked out in 3 months or 6 months, but there was really no expectation or no plan to have the individuals around longer than that, then we wanted like people who absolutely knew it. The problem was when we were working on something that was bleeding edge, right? Brand new technology that had only just been introduced to the market, 6 years ago or a year ago. It's like, well, we can't find anybody that's got 5 years of experience because it's brand new. So, why are we spending high dollars on high dollar contractors? Why don't we just grow that talent internally and teach people the new technology?
Exactly. And here's the next thing that companies are missing, and I think they need to make it part of their quote unquote benefits package. And that's um, put budgeting dollars away for each person to allow them to go to conferences, and allow them to get out also into the communities. Because that's huge. I mean, it's huge for everyone. And stifling that I think is going to be one of the next big things around hiring, because when salaries are basically at the same level, are you going to let me go to one conference a year of my choice and cover all of that? I mean, these things can be about $2,000 depending where you're going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I think that's something else that companies need to really start focusing around, allowing their, not just even just bringing training in, but let people get out into the communities and meet others that are working on these technologies as well.
Yeah, and it really depends on where you live, unfortunately. So I kind of grew up and spent a lot of time, most of my years in the Midwest, in Oklahoma, and there's only a couple of small local conferences there. And to go to any of the big, established conferences, man, you got to fly to one of the coasts. You got to go out to Vegas. You got to go out to LA. You got to come out here to, Orlando or to New York or something like that. And then you got all the travel expenses on top of the conference expenses, and it adds up. And unfortunately, there's just not enough companies who are willing to do that. Say, you know what, we want to invest in the personal growth and the social growth and the technical growth of our employees, and here's X amount of money to spend, every year for you guys to go get that development.
If you're looking for the best people on the planet, I mean, this is absolutely one way to entice them to come work for you, as opposed to the company down the street or over the wire somewhere else, right? Like, let me know that this is going to be much more than just a job for me every day, that I have an opportunity to do things that I personally would not be able to do on my own otherwise.
Absolutely, because anytime I've been in one of those situations where I feel like the organization really, really cares about me and they really value me as a human, as an individual, and they're looking out for my best interests as well as, making sure that I'm looking out for theirs, then you know what? This is Productivity Tuesday, and my productivity in those situations would go through the roof, because I'm going to bend over backwards to help them out, not just in crisis and times of need and when we have to step up and all hands on deck solve a problem or put out a fire, but I'm really just going to put my best effort into helping the people that are helping me.
And here's the other part. You now have a presence at the conference you wouldn't have had otherwise, without necessarily having to sponsor anything large there, right? Like, I'd wear the T-shirt. Give me a company T-shirt. Give me a nice one. I'll wear it every day. I mean, I'm proud to be there because you're supporting me as well. So it's a lot of benefit there.
Good stuff. Well, today being Productivity Tuesday, Bill, on our last talk on that People Monday, it was all about the people, and it was all about these tech interviews and building the right culture and some of the people that you look up to in business and how they treat their people and how they hire their people. But today we're talking about productivity, and you had mentioned in that episode that the Go programming language is so powerful and you can get so much done with it, that we just kind of teased on that. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time in that episode to go into the nuts and bolts and the details. So we came back today, and in between then and now, so that was episode 54. So our audience can go out to hellotechpros.com/54, get access to that episode. And since then, there was another audience member who was inspired to speak on the topic after listening to yours, Mr. Aaron Schlesinger. And on episode 95, he talked about Golang will make your plumbing code sexy. And it's really, that DevOps, the plumbing code, the stuff behind the scenes that doesn't get any, awards in many cases because all the fancy UIs and everything gets all the attention. But it's that plumbing code that helps keep the engine running, right? Keeps the company running. All of the build code, all of the pipeline code, all of that. When it's written in Go, man, it's going to be a lot more sexy than some of the other technologies that you may be used to. So our audience members, and you, Bill, if you haven't checked that out, you can go to hellotechpros.com/95 to get access to that episode. So today, let's talk productivity, man. So first, tell us about maybe a problem that you've had, a struggle that you've had in the past with productivity, and what you did to overcome it.
Well, let me take it a different direction if I can, because
All right,
I do
cool.
trainings all over the world, and people are usually in these trainings because they've heard how performant, how fast people's software is when they write it in Go. And that tends to be lately a place of drawing people into the language. But I always start every single training, every single meetup with this one question. I'm going to ask you this question. You're a software developer, right? So let me ask you this question.
I have been in a former life, yes.
So, does performance matter? You're writing software, right, to solve business problems. But at the end of the day, I ask every single developer I meet, does performance matter? So when you were writing software or the software that you have there, does performance matter?
Yes.
Yes, you're going to say yes. Everybody in the
Yes.
room will raise their hand. And I love when that happens because the reality is that if performance really mattered to software developers, I mean, really mattered to the bulk of software developers that I meet and that are out there, then we'd only have two languages, assembly and C,
Hmm.
right? Because if performance matters, those are the languages you really need to be writing your software in. And that's not the case. Over the last 30 years, we've seen lots of languages come out, basic, the Rubies, the Pythons, the Java, I mean, all of these languages, right?
Hmm.
At PHP. And they're not going, if anybody asks you, well, why are you writing in this language, right? It's not about performance. It has been for the last 30 plus years about productivity. It's about being able to solve that problem quickly with the hope that the hardware will take care of our performance issues, that the
Hmm.
hardware will make it fast enough so we can move ridiculously quickly while solving this problem. And this has been the way it has for well over 30 years. In fact, about 30 years ago, we got Worth's Law. He was screaming over 30 years ago, as early as 1987, that the software we're writing is more sluggish than the hardware can make fast. Really interesting. Yet it
Wow.
didn't matter because productivity has always mattered more and will always matter more.
That's so awesome. I love that take on it because it kind of takes me back to a time when I was writing code, and in this organization we were developing a document repository that really replaced or augmented the offsite record center, right? So for this was at an oil and gas company, and all of these geologists and geophysicists, they needed lots and lots of data, and all of their data from these wells that were drilled back in the 1950s or the 1970s or 3 weeks ago, it's all paper documents, right? And it's just like warehouses full of documents. And so they would, when they wanted to look at information on an oil well, they would send off to the record center, and it would take 3 or 4 days in order for the record center to pull those boxes out of the warehouse, put it on a truck, ship it to the office, and then it would take them, days or hours or weeks to be able to go through each of those boxes, depending on if you got one box in or if you got 17 boxes in, to go through and filter through those documents to find the one piece of paper that you were looking for that had the right information on the report. Well, we did a whole huge OCR process, and we scanned all those documents. We OCR'd them, we digitized them, and we put a very nice user interface on it where you could search by text or by location, like geolocation via map, lots of other things. And we gave it to the users, and they said, oh my gosh, this thing is so slow. It takes like, I click go, I click search, and it takes like 3 minutes to come back with the result of the thing I was looking for. That's just too slow. That's absolutely unacceptable. And I'm like, okay, 3 minutes is bad. But the old way that you just had last week, right, where it would take you 4 days to get it and then a week or two to find it, that was acceptable. So it's just funny how the perceived difference between speed or performance and productivity. I love that.
And my guess is they thought it was slow because for 3 minutes they had nothing else that they could do, where they were probably busy doing something, even if it was wasting effort. They felt busy and now they didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
it's all interesting. So this is where I think Go really shines because what Go's main focus really is about being a productive software developer to be able to move your products, your features, your services forward with getting what I would always say enough the performance. The performance that you need. Is the performance good enough? Yes, with performance that is good enough with the full level of productivity in writing that software. And I think this is Go's sweet spot. And when you've got developers that are coming from scripting languages, um, and they're able to be really productive writing the same code they were, and now they get this added bonus of their software just looking like it's running 100% faster and sometimes maybe more perception at that point. It's like, oh my God, right? What you're saying in your head is, man, I'm able to write software that really performs. But what's really happening is that you're writing software in a very productive way that happens to be performing really, really well.
Mm.
And this to me is Go's sweet spot here. That now the question has to be, well, what did Go do? What did the language designers do? What is so special about this language that it allows you to be productive as opposed to other languages that are out there? And yet you gain this level of performance, right? Like, how did they do it? And for me, and what I teach are these like four cornerstones to writing software. Now, these kind of become part of guidelines and maybe in some cases some idioms around the Go language. So one thing I have to stress is, as we talk about these things, I think they can be important across a wide spectrum of languages, but each language does have its own idioms and ways to do things. And if you don't follow those, you will have problems in a community of people, right? Because they expect certain things to be done a certain way.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. Sounds good. So let's dive into them. What are the four cornerstones of writing good software with Go?
So here are the four cornerstones that I teach. And they also apply into when you're doing code reviews, when you're thinking about code, and when you're writing that code. So
Okay.
number one is integrity. Nothing ever, never, ever, never, ever can trump integrity. And what we mean by integrity is that every read and every write, every operation that your software performs is done with consistency and accuracy. I mean, we can all tell stories about a piece of software that went off the deep end, lost a level of integrity, started corrupting data somewhere. And if we were lucky enough, we found it quickly. If we were unlucky enough, accounts were being trashed over a period of months, right?
Yep.
There's no productivity in that at that point. In fact, it's a very dangerous and scary situation. And so Go's main thing is integrity, the way the language works, the way the compilers work. When you have this Go program, at the end of the day, you know that from the compiler perspective, every read and every write has a level of integrity. It doesn't mean you can't do things that won't cause your program to panic, but you want that panic to happen when you lose integrity. So nothing can trump it. There's no decision you can make that says, I want to take this trade-off over that trade-off where we're trading off integrity. And that's another
right. So
thing.
It's not like it's a situation where you've got time, resources, and money, and you're trying to move the three around, and you're saying, okay, well, on this project, we're going to throw more money at it in order to decrease time. You never want a situation where you move like, okay, let's get the speed of the application up much faster. Let's double the speed by increasing the amount of data corruption that we have, right? We never want that. We never want to make that trade-off.
Right. You don't want a piece of software that runs at blazing speed but has to be restarted every night, right? As opposed to it runs a little slower, but guess what? It never has to restart and we can sleep at night. I don't like waking up at 3 a.m. anymore. I don't know about you.
Well, sometimes I do just because I'm getting old, but I don't want to restart servers while I'm getting up.
Exactly. And so This is really Go. Go is always going to say integrity first, and nothing can trump it. Now, number two, what you hear about a lot is code needs to be readable. Readable code is code that is going to have less bugs, is going to have less issues. So what does readability really mean, right? You hear about it all the time. What does it mean? Readability to me means two things. And it's actually something that we've really lost, as far as I'm concerned, over the last 30 years as well. One is being able to look at a piece of code, a block of code, and understand what it's doing without too much mental exhaustion, right? Without having to necessarily run that code in your head at full speed. But the other piece that we've really lost and Go has brought back to us is the ability to look at a line of code, a block of code, and understand the cost of that code. Because you cannot solve a problem, and every problem we solve in computer science here really is a data transformation problem. There's some input data, we got to get to this output. Everything is a data transformation problem. And so the ability to look at what you're writing, every line of code, every block of code, and understand its cost is huge, because if you cannot understand the cost of the code, how could you possibly make the best decisions about how to solve that problem? And I'm not talking about being able to get a line of code down to the number of clock cycles, or even down to the number of lines of assembly that are produced by the compiler. You could even still be above that and still be able to look at a piece of code and understand its cost relative to everything else around it. And now you can start making some very good decisions. And two
Okay,
other
so
things. Go on.
sorry, in this space, when you say the cost of the code, are you talking about like the performance, like the big O notation, like, hey, this particular block of code is going to be linear, or it's going to be logarithmic, right? Or whatever the case may be. But I can look at this block of code and I could tell you that the more data we put into it, it's either going to scale appropriately, or you know what, as soon as we start putting 1,000 records on it, 10,000, a million records on it, it's going to start choking up.
It can be that. It can be that. It could be something as simple as, I love this example. If I showed you a line of code that said A equals B, where A and B are just integers, 8-byte integers, A equals B, and I said to you, what do you think the cost of this code is? It's from a C program. You would look at it and say, Bill, there's really not that much cost there at all. We got to move 8 bytes from right to left, right? And overall, if we were doing any sort of profiling, this line of code, Bill, wouldn't even show up. And you can look at that code and you say, okay, but what if I told you that this program, that line of code didn't come from a C program, it came from a C# program or a Java program or a C++ program? You can no longer understand the cost of that one line of code, because those languages have operator overloading. That assignment operator might be overloaded. There may be 300 or more lines of assembly language underneath that code. There could be network calls underneath that code. Who knows what's behind that one line of code? And so you're now looking at a line of code and you're trying to make a decision about this line of code relative to everything else. But you have no understanding of what the cost of writing that line of code is. No understanding at all. And one of the things that Go provides, Go doesn't provide operator overloading, right? We don't want to write code where the cost of that code can be abstracted and hidden away. And I'll give you a simpler example. I was looking at some code last week, and the developer was doing some sort of map operation with type assertions, and I won't get into details, but the code looked fairly ugly. One line of code, really, but it did look fairly ugly. So they decided to wrap it around a function. And I said, what are we doing here? We're wrapping a function around this one line of code with the idea that calling the function is going to seem simpler when we read the code than looking at this map type assertion. And I said, but what we've really done here is hid the cost of what this code does. I no longer understand what the cost is when I look at this piece of code, all because we wanted to wrap one line of code around something that we thought looked ugly. And so for me, readability is not only just being able to look at code and understand what it's doing, function by function, line by line, but understanding really also, and some of this takes time, but the cost of what this code is doing relative to everything else, so we can make the best decisions. So that's readability.
Gotcha. So Bill, we've talked about the integrity of the code, right? It can't lose data. It can't corrupt things. We don't want the server to restart, to trash itself, to fall apart, right? And then the readability of the code, we gotta understand what it is. We gotta look at it and just understand the simplicity of what was the goal here, what are we trying to accomplish, and then understand the cost of the operations. And is it an expensive operation? Is it a cheap operation? Is it going to be fast? Is it going to be slow? Is it going to be a memory hog? Is it not? Right, without hiding a lot of the details, because that devil's in the details. And sometimes when you use other languages, you know what? You can hide some things and you can try to make it more readable, but in that process, you can lose some of the details. So, Bill, in just a moment, let's talk about the other two cornerstones of writing great software, specifically using the Go programming language. But first, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by me, Chad Bostic. As an enterprise IT leader, I've gotten the opportunity to solve a number of different business problems, including field worker productivity, back office process efficiencies, enterprise system integrations, big data analysis, resource management, and IT complexity reduction. Each project comes with its own unique challenge, whether it be distributed teams, change management, stakeholder buy-in, availability of subject matter experts, or just getting one technology to play nice with others. Let me know what business problem is keeping you up at night and how you'd like me to help. Go to chadbostic.com and click the contact button, or text "Hello Chad," all one word, to 44222. That's chadbostic.com, chadbostic.com, and click the contact button, or text "Hello Chad," all one word, HELLOCHAD, to 44222. Okay, we're back with Bill Kennedy. Bill is a managing partner at Ardan Studio in Miami, Florida, who works on mobile, web, and systems development. And he's the co-author of the book Go in Action. He's a Go programming language expert. He teaches Go all the time. He's a founding member of GoBridge, which is working to increase Go adoption through the diversity. And in this episode, we've been talking about the 4 cornerstones of writing software that's just makes it a lot better, right? Just these 4 cornerstones will make everything about your software so much better. And the first one is integrity. The integrity of the software, making sure that it's not going to corrupt the code, making sure that it's not going to crash. It's going to just work. And second of all, the readability. We want less bugs because our team members can understand what the heck we were doing. We want to understand what the heck we were doing 3 weeks from now when we're looking at the code again going, I know it worked and it compiled, but I don't really remember how I got it to work. And then we don't want to hide and abstract away some of those details that can be very, very problematic if we don't account for them. So, Bill, what are the other 2 cornerstones?
So number 3 is what is simplicity. And now we get into a situation of when can I walk away from readability for simplicity? And simplicity, to me, is about algorithm efficiencies and not wasting effort. You know, NASA did a study. They looked at their entire code base at one time, and they did a study, and they came to this number. They said every 10 lines of code we write produces a bug, whether we like it or not. Every 10 lines of code. So for me, simplicity is about not wasting effort. You have to perform this data transformation. And if we can do it in the least amount of lines of code as possible and the least number of steps, well, isn't that going to give us better efficiency than writing an algorithm that requires us to do more steps? And so there are times, though, that to get to algorithm efficiency, to get to simplicity, you might have to write code that's a little less readable. But when you make that decision, I want it to be conscious. I want us to be able to sit during a code review and say, we are walking away from readability here because simplicity right now matters more. And not because it's a gut feeling, it's because we've done some profiling, we've done some benchmarking, and we've identified that we need to write this code to be a little bit more simple, a little bit more efficient, and maybe because of that, it's a little less readable. So that's simplicity. That's number 3. But it can only trump readability when you consciously decide this and you have some empirical data around that, right? Can't be just a gut feeling. I meet way too many developers who start writing code and they're thinking about performance at the time their fingers are on the keyboard. They start making decisions around architecture with some idea that this is going to be slower if I do that. And then they start making decisions that really start to walk away from readability and simplicity, even at an architecture level. And I constantly have to bring people back and say, until it is not fast enough, stop and let's do things with integrity and readability first until it is not fast enough. This isn't about it being the best performing software on the planet. Is it fast enough? So that's simplicity. And then the very last one is performance. That's when you've actually done benchmarking and profiling. You've actually identified that in this critical situation that it has to be faster. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. And now we're probably writing very clever code to get us to that point, maybe even some embedded assembly language there, right? But that's always the very, very last thing. If I hear the word performance coming out of a software developer's mouth and I don't see benchmarks and profiles, everybody in my classroom laughs when I say this, but we're going to take a walk because we've got to now have a conversation. It's not a bad walk. It's a walk about, hey, what are you thinking about here? Why did you go in this direction? Let's step back. Let's talk about readability first. Let's talk about simplicity first, right? Don't code with performance in mind. Go is so sympathetic with the hardware and the operating systems, and Go's idioms are pushing us towards these sympathies all the time that we can really focus on integrity, readability, and simplicity first. And most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, we get enough performance.
Awesome. Sounds great. So, Bill, before we go, I didn't even mean to do that, but before we leave this episode, maybe you could share with us a few times of when we should pick this language, right? Because we hinted at a lot of different language, right? There's assembly, there's C, there's C++, there's Java, there's C#, there's everything else that you can imagine. There's Ruby, there's Python, there's all of them. When do we pick Go? And we'll compare your answer to the answer that we had on some of the other episodes and just kind of see overall what's the flavor of when do we want to use Go versus when do we want to choose one of these other languages for their strong suits.
For me, I want to step back and remember that Google is seriously funding this project, right? It is open source. But Google has 15 plus years of legacy C programs and other languages as well. And part of the reason for the language being developed was that there was a lot of unproductivity going on inside of Google as it related to the C code base for several reasons. So I think if you're building something that even Google would be building, anything networking related, anything service related, backend related, CLI tooling, these types of things, I think that's where Go's wheelhouse is, all right? Networking, CLI toolings, web services, any type of backend services. Go is also right now, there's been huge effort over the last couple of years to allow you to do mobile development in Go. That's coming along really, really great. And I think what you're going to find very soon too is the whole Internet of Things is also going to be a sweet spot for Go as well, and there's some really nice development going on for packages to allow you to do that IoT sort of development for everything. So I think these three areas if you're in any of these three areas right now, I think you should really look at Go to say for that next project, let's see what happens if we try to write this Go. Can we do it quickly? I think you're going to find you can. Can we understand this language? I think you already do. And then when you realize that you have that level of productivity, the same level of productivity you probably have today in Ruby and Python, and then you see the performance benefit you got on the other end, it becomes really hard to say, oh my God, why are we not using this language?
Awesome. Great stuff. Let's go check out Go, and we can start by checking out Bill's book. Bill, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience? And then let us know the best way that we can connect with you and your book and your websites and all that good stuff. And then we'll say goodbye.
Final word of wisdom, whatever language you're working in, really learn and focus around what the idioms and guidelines are for that language, because it's those things that are going to help you write the best code in that language and write code that the majority of developers around you can read and maintain going forward. There are some things that we talk about on the Go side, I think, that are applicable to everything, but at the same time, you have to follow the right idioms. And if you want to reach me, goandgo.net on Twitter, bill@ardanlabs.com, and I'm out there on the Go for Slack channel quite a bit. So lots of ways you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Bill, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your message, but you know what? I value you plugging me into this Go community more than me just knowing like the ins and outs and bits and bytes of a new programming language. Because what I've found is just in the last few weeks, right? Just since the last time that we've talked, that the Go community is like really strong. They're tight-knit, they're friendly, they're helpful. And I've had so many people reach out to me. I've had a couple of different people that I've talked to that work in the Go community that we've had on the episode. So like I said, I talked to Aaron Schlesinger on that episode. I also talked to A.B. Periasamy from Minio.io, who turned into one of the sponsors of the Hello Tech Pros podcast. And so I just really value getting the opportunity to talk to you and get plugged into the Go community that's just pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome that I'm hearing that from you. I mean, we really do work hard as a community to try to be inclusive and welcoming, and I love when I hear people like yourself saying that. So yeah, and ABL and Minio are awesome people and awesome company too. So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Cool. You bet. Tech Pros, if you are a software developer and you are working, no matter what programming language you're working with, you know what? Just sometimes we get wrapped around the axle of I got to get the thing to compile, or I gotta make it more and more and more efficient, more performance, even if the users aren't complaining, because they might complain someday in the future. So maybe take a step back, prioritize what are the things that you need to be working on, where are the things that we need to improve, that we need to refactor, and just take another hard look at the requirements. You've been listening to Bill Kennedy, and I'm Chad Bostic, and until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/149. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Productivity Tuesday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I are talking about leadership. Thursday, technology. Friday, people in communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. Sunday, being unplugged. Monday, motivation. And then we do it all over again next Tuesday for productivity. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.